In October 2025, one company quietly signed a deal that consumed 40% of the entire world's memory chip production. Not 10%, not 20, 40. Within weeks, the price of the RAM inside your laptop, your phone, your car doubled, then tripled. Retailers in Tokyo started rationing memory sticks like wartime groceries. Dell's chief operating officer told analysts he had never witnessed costs escalating at the current pace. And Elon Musk went on an earnings call and told shareholders that Tesla would probably have to build its own chip factory from scratch, one he wants to be bigger than anything on Earth. This isn't a temporary supply hiccup. This is the biggest restructuring of the global semiconductor industry in decades. And almost nobody saw it coming. Right now in early 2026, we're living through something the memory industry has never experienced before. DRAM prices have surged over 170% year over year. DDR5 spot prices have quadrupled since September 2025. PC makers are raising prices 15 to 20%. Flagship smartphones that were supposed to ship with 16 gigs of RAM this year, most of them got downgraded back to 12. And here's the part that should concern everyone. Analysts are saying this shortage could persist until 2027 or even 2028. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how we got here. Who's responsible? Why this crisis is fundamentally different from any chip shortage before it, and what it means for the price of basically every piece of technology you'll buy for the next 3 years. To understand how we got to this moment, you need to understand one critical thing about how memory chips are made. The global DRAM market is controlled by 3 companies. Just 3. Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. Together, they produce roughly 93% of all the memory on the planet. That's not a competitive market, that's an oligopoly. And for decades, this arrangement worked well enough. These 3 companies would ride predictable boom and bust cycles. Oversupply would crash prices, they'd cut production. Prices would recover. They'd ramp back up. Rinse and repeat. The industry called these memory cycles, and everyone from PC builders to smartphone makers had learned to plan around them. But starting in 2024, something changed the equation entirely. Nvidia launched its Blackwell architecture, and data centers around the world scrambled for a specialized type of memory called high bandwidth memory, or HBM. Now, HBM isn't your regular RAM stick, it's a stack of DRAM chips layered vertically and connected by microscopic pathways called through-silicon vias. It's engineered specifically to feed data to AI processors at blistering speeds. And it's insanely profitable. We're talking margins 5 times higher than standard DRAM, so when Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron saw those margins, they made a rational business decision that would set the entire tech industry on fire. They began converting their existing fabrication lines, the ones that had been making the DDR4 and DDR5 memory you and I use every day, into HBM production lines. Samsung ramped its advanced DRAM capacity to target 60,000 wafers per month specifically for HBM4. DDR4 production reportedly dropped to barely 20% of 2024 levels. The factories didn't shut down, they just stopped making memory for you and me and started making it for AI data centers instead. By late 2025, global DRAM inventory levels had collapsed from a comfortable 13 to 17 weeks of supply down to just 2 to 4 weeks. For context, that's like going from having a well-stocked pantry to having enough food for a long weekend. Any disruption, a factory hiccup, a spike in orders, an earthquake, would now send shockwaves through the entire supply chain. In early October 2025, OpenAI announced a partnership with Samsung and SK Hynix that would become the most consequential supply chain event of the decade. As part of its Stargate data center initiative, a $500 billion infrastructure project backed by Oracle and SoftBank, OpenAI secured preliminary agreements for 900,000 DRAM wafers per month. Let that number sink in. Global DRAM production capacity was projected at roughly 2.25 million wafer starts per month for 2025. OpenAI just locked up 40% of it. And they weren't buying finished memory modules. They were buying raw, undiced silicon wafers, reserved the manufacturing capacity itself before chips could even be cut and tested. It was like buying an entire farm's harvest before the seeds were planted, leaving everyone else to fight over whatever scraps were left. What made this deal even more destabilizing was the secrecy. According to industry insiders, Samsung and SK Hynix themselves didn't know the full scale or timing of each other's agreements with OpenAI. Both companies committed massive capacity without a clear picture of the combined impact. By the time the market understood what had happened, the damage was done. Think about what that means for you. A single AI project, one that OpenAI itself doesn't expect to be profitable until 2029 or 2030, had effectively commandeered nearly half the world's memory supply. Every laptop, every smartphone, every server, every car with a digital dashboard was now competing for what was left. But here's what nobody's talking about. The RAM shortage isn't just a RAM shortage, it's the first domino in a chain reaction that's tearing through the entire tech supply chain, sector by sector, continent by continent. The memory that goes into your phone's storage, a NAND flash, got hit too. Manufacturers had been prioritizing higher margin enterprise SSDs for data centers while phasing out older production processes faster than anyone expected. In November 2025, contract prices for certain NAND wafer categories spiked over 60% in a single month. And it wasn't just chips. A material called glass cloth, a high-performance glass fiber substrate critical for data transfer in chip manufacturing, entered its own supply crisis. A Japanese company called Nitto Boseki holds a near monopoly on this material, and it simply couldn't keep up. Qualcomm, Apple, Nvidia, and AMD were all scrambling to secure supply. Western Digital's entire hard drive output for 2026 booked solid for enterprise applications before February. Consumer customers were an afterthought. The ripple effects hit every sector. Dell, Lenovo, and HP announced PC price increases of 15 to 20%. Memory now accounts for roughly 18% of a new PC's total component cost, about double what it was in 2024. Cyberpower PC, a major gaming PC builder, warned customers that certain memory modules had increased in cost by more than 500% since mid-2023, with the steepest jump in recent months, and started raising its own prices in December 2025. In Japan, electronics shops in Akihabara, the iconic tech district in Tokyo, implemented purchase limits on standalone RAM and SSD's 2 SATA drives. That's your limit per visit. Want more? You'd have to buy a full assembled PC. Some retailers even started selling memory certificates. We haven't seen rationing like that since the pandemic. And then something strange happened. The shortage didn't just hurt companies, it radicalized them. In late January 2026, Elon Musk got on a Tesla earnings call and told shareholders something remarkable. He said that even under the absolute best-case supply scenario from Tesla's existing chip partners, the company still wouldn't have enough semiconductors. His solution? Build what he called a TeraFab, a chip fabrication plant larger than anything currently in existence. Logic chips, memory chips, packaging, all domestic, all under one roof. For context, TSMC calls its biggest facilities gigafabs. Musk wants something a tier above that. He's talking about starting at 100,000 wafer starts per month and eventually scaling to 1 million. Tesla allocated $20 billion in capital expenditure for 2026, more than double the previous year. And the TeraFab isn't even included in that number yet. Jensen Huang responded almost immediately. He warned that building advanced chip manufacturing is extremely hard, and that Musk might be underestimating the challenge. Building a fab isn't just about the building. It's about the engineering, the science, and what Huang called the artistry of what TSMC does for a living. And there's a practical problem. The Semiconductor Industry Association projects a shortfall of around 67,000 skilled workers in the US by 2030. TSMC's own Arizona fab was delayed from 2024 to 2027 or 2028, partly because of a lack of qualified local workers. But Musk's announcement matters beyond Tesla. It signals something profound. Major technology companies are now so alarmed by the memory crisis that they're willing to spend tens of billions of dollars and years of effort to escape their dependency on the existing supply chain. The old model, where everyone relied on 3 Korean and American companies to share production nicely, is breaking down. So where does this leave us? Let me lay out 3 things I think most people are missing about this crisis. First, this is not a normal chip shortage. Every previous memory cycle was driven by consumer demand fluctuations. Too many PCs one year, not enough the next. The 2025 to 2026 crisis is structurally different. It's driven by an entirely new category of demand, AI infrastructure, that didn't meaningfully exist 5 years ago. We're not dealing with a cyclical dip that'll self-correct in 18 months. We're watching the semiconductor industry permanently realign its priorities around artificial intelligence. When the CEO of a leading DRAM manufacturer can make 5 times the margin, selling HBM to a data center versus DDR5 to a laptop maker, the math is clear. Consumer memory will never be the priority again. The numbers back this up. Samsung is planning a 50% surge in HBM capacity in 2026. Both Samsung and SK Hynix will begin mass production of HBM4 in February 2026. Micron has announced a $200 billion US investment commitment, but meaningful new production won't start until mid-2027. At the earliest, Intel's Lip-Bu Tan has publicly stated there will likely be no relief until 2028. Second, this crisis is about to reshape what technology looks like for ordinary people. The expected jump to 16 or 24 gigs of RAM in flagship phones for 2026? Mostly cancelled. Premium smartphones are sticking to 12 gigs. Budget phones staying at 6 or 8. The whole premise of AI on your phone and AI on your laptop. The narrative that Microsoft, Apple, and Google have been building their product roadmaps around depends on having more memory in devices, not less. Microsoft's Copilot Plus PCs require a minimum of 16 gigs. Many AI workloads want 32 or more. But right now, at the exact moment the industry needs to put more RAM into your devices, it's become prohibitively expensive to do so. IDC warned that this threatens to derail the industry's growth narrative around AI PCs. That's a remarkably blunt statement from a research firm that usually speaks in euphemisms. And it's not just phones and laptops. The automotive sector is watching nervously as legacy DRAM production contracts. Modern cars are packed with electronics, infotainment systems, driver assistance features, autonomous driving components. If legacy memory production keeps shrinking, automakers could face production disruptions by 2028. The car industry barely survived the last chip shortage. Another one could hit even harder. Third, and this is the implication that keeps me up at night, we may be witnessing the early stages of a geopolitical memory war. The semiconductor supply chain was already fractured by US-China tensions. Now the memory crisis is accelerating that fracture into a full break. US export controls on advanced memory technology to China have prompted Chinese retaliation targeting critical minerals. Samsung and SK Hynix halted sales of older semiconductor equipment to Chinese firms throughout 2025, cutting off pathways that Chinese manufacturers had relied on to build domestic capacity. In response, Chinese companies like CXMT are ramping production, but their output is trapped behind compliance risks and the threat of being added to the US entity list. They can serve their own domestic market, but exporting to Dell, HP, or Apple is practically impossible without risking sanctions. The result is a bifurcated global memory market. China may eventually see local oversupply and falling prices, while the rest of the world remains starved because it cannot or will not integrate Chinese-made silicon. Two parallel memory economies, each insufficient on its own. Apple, recognizing this fragmentation early, reportedly accelerated plans to source all US-bound iPhones from India to sidestep potential tariff exposure. Everyone is repositioning. Nobody knows where the new equilibrium will land. So, what should you actually do with this information? Because this isn't just a story to watch from the sidelines. The decisions you make in the next 6 months could save you real money. If you were planning to build a PC or upgrade your RAM, the window for waiting out the crisis closed in late 2025. Prices will be higher 6 months from now than they are today. If you built a DDR5 system in 2024 or early 2025, that investment aged remarkably well. Your platform is set for the next 5 years. Just add capacity when prices eventually normalize. If you work in IT procurement, the old just-in-time purchasing model is broken. You need to be reserving hardware early, standardizing configurations, and building relationships with suppliers who can guarantee allocation. The era of casually ordering servers and expecting them to show up in 2 weeks is over. And if you're an investor or just someone trying to understand where the economy is heading, watch the memory market closely. Memory manufacturers are posting historic margins right now. Samsung and SK Hynix gross margins are projected to exceed even TSMC's. A historic reversal that tells you just how severe the scarcity premium has become. Remember that deal I opened with? One company, 40% of global memory production, signed in the span of weeks. That's the moment the old semiconductor world ended. For 20 years, we lived in an economy where memory got cheaper every year, where each new generation of phones and laptops came with more RAM at a lower price. Moore's law wasn't just about transistors getting smaller, it was a promise that technology would keep getting better and cheaper. That promise is broken, and it's not coming back anytime soon. The core insight here is deceptively simple. AI didn't just change software, it's physically consuming the infrastructure that the rest of the technology industry depends on. And ordinary consumers are the ones picking up the tab for someone else's trillion-dollar bet. Prices will peak somewhere around mid-2026, stabilize at an elevated plateau through 2027, and only begin meaningful declines in 2028 when new fabrication capacity finally comes online. Even then, expect prices to remain 30 to 50% above where they were in 2024. The old normal is gone. If you want to go deeper on how AI is reshaping hardware supply chains, I'd recommend checking out the video on chip manufacturing geopolitics linked above. And I'm genuinely curious, has the RAM shortage affected you personally? Have you delayed a PC build or noticed your next phone has less memory than expected? Drop that in the comments. The stories from the ground are often more revealing than the analyst reports.